Imagine a colossal galactic-scale megacorporation. The original CEO has been completely comatose for 10 millennia. The board of directors routinely murders each other in the primary boardroom over budgetary disputes, trivial ones. The essential manufacturing facilities are currently being consumed by an apocalyptic fire. Logically, according to every established metric of cosmic economics, this business entity should have filed for absolute bankruptcy epochs ago. And yet, trillions of human employees keep commuting to the office every single morning. They punch their time cards. They expire at their designated workstations, purely because human resources is too bloated, too inefficient to process their formal extinction paperwork. Welcome to the Imperium of Man. They are not the glorious, radiant defenders of the galaxy holding back the darkness. They are the ultimate zombie corporation, a civilization surviving the absolute horrors of the cosmos not through bravery, not through hope, through suffocating, inescapable bureaucratic inertia. To comprehend the sheer scale of the Imperium of Man, you must first observe the ultimate manifestation of structural stagnation. This is a sprawling, decaying administrative leviathan. It lost any true sense of direction, innovation, or underlying purpose a long, long time ago. The company does not expand its borders to bring prosperity to its trillions of shareholders. It expands strictly to harvest enough raw materials to keep the rusted machinery running. Just the atmospheric scrubbers, nothing more. It is an empire sustained entirely by the crushing, unstoppable momentum of its own monumental paperwork. Completely detached from the human lives it claims to govern, the entire human species has been reduced to a disposable resource, fed into a massive, grinding corporate apparatus that forgot how to properly shut itself down. At the absolute center of this nightmare sits the founder, the emperor of mankind. He is permanently tethered to the golden throne, a continent-sized life support mechanism, the galaxy's most expensive, most catastrophically inefficient medical bed. He issues no verbal directives. He drafts no quarterly roadmaps. He provides zero inspirational leadership to the struggling workforce. He is a silent, rotting figurehead, maintained in perpetual agony, strictly because the remaining senior executives are too fundamentally terrified to unplug the machine, too terrified to tell the shareholders the CEO has permanently left the building. The entire theological foundation of the species is, essentially, an elaborate, terrifying corporate cover-up, designed to hide an empty executive chair. In his total absence, daily operations fall to the High Lords of Terror, effectively the most incompetent, deeply corrupt board of directors ever assembled in the history of sentient life. Rather than addressing the myriad interdimensional crises actively threatening the franchise, these executives spend their entire extended tenures engaging in petty, centuries-long political assassinations. Over trivial budgetary disputes, they operate under the profound psychotic delusion that they are expertly steering the grand ship of state, blissfully ignoring the catastrophic reality that the steering mechanism detached from the primary console 5 millennia ago. They are bureaucrats rearranging the deck chairs on a sinking ship, completely convinced that adjusting the seating chart will somehow stop the encroaching ocean. The true architect of human survival, therefore, is the Adeptus Administratum, the galactic equivalent of a suffocating, inescapable accounting and human resources division. This labyrinthine department spans entire solar systems, countless billions of scribes, logistical clerks, mid-level managers, all manually recording the minutiae of the empire. On physical parchment, they are an endless, unfeeling ocean of bureaucrats, operating completely without basic digital search functions, ensuring that even the simplest military requisition request takes several standard human lifespans to properly process. They treat the administration of a galaxy-spanning war exactly the same way a terrible insurance company handles a denied claim, by burying it beneath a mountain of unreadable, redundant forms. This staggering administrative lag is, ironically, the exact mechanism preventing humanity's immediate collapse. The Imperium routinely demands massive, unyielding tithes of grain, ammunition, and fresh conscripts from planets that were completely devoured by alien swarms centuries prior. The primary filing clerks on Terra are entirely unaware that the planet in question no longer exists in physical reality. The logistical system is so rigidly inflexible, it simply ignores the apocalyptic truth. The company cannot officially go bankrupt. The required paperwork declaring the insolvency has been permanently lost in a transit corridor. Since the 32nd millennium, the Empire survives purely because it is too administratively delayed to realize it is already dead. Ultimately, the Imperium of Man proves a deeply cynical cosmic theorem. A system does not actually need to be functional, efficient, or even sane to endure. It merely needs to be so unfathomably vast, so deeply entrenched in redundant paperwork, that the universe itself cannot figure out how to properly dismantle it. Humanity is essentially hiding from cosmic extinction behind an impenetrable, towering fortress of unfiled tax returns and pending compliance audits. They have weaponized bureaucratic exhaustion, proving that the most resilient shield against the darkness of the universe is an endless stack of mandatory paperwork. Stepping away from the upper echelons of terror, we must analyze the grueling, profoundly depressing existence of the standard imperial employee. For the trillions of citizens born into the suffocating, lightless depths of an industrialized hive city, life is nothing more than an inescapable, multi-generational shift inside a hazardous manufacturing plant. They are born directly onto the assembly line. They labor within toxic smog for 16 uninterrupted hours a day. Their eventual demise is quietly recorded as a minor, fractional dip in that sector's quarterly production quota. There is zero upward mobility, no severance packages, absolutely no retirement plans. There is only the unyielding demand of the quota. The human being is stripped of all individuality, systematically reduced to a biological cog, installed into a rusted machine merely to replace the previous worn-out part. Within this bleak, mechanized environment, the fundamental concept of hope has been systematically eradicated, entirely replaced by blind, unyielding compliance. These workers do not endure the grim darkness of the far future because they genuinely believe tomorrow will bring a brighter dawn, or improved working conditions. They endure simply because the factory bell just rang. The planetary overseer is holding a shock whip, and standing perfectly still constitutes a punishable offense against the state. They are trapped within a perpetual cycle of agonizing routine, continuing to turn the heavy gears of the Empire merely because stopping requires an initiative they were never permitted to develop. The system meticulously beats the capacity for independent thought out of them, leaving behind a compliant workforce that accepts perpetual misery as standard operating procedure. This terrifying expendability is perfectly mirrored in the Imperium's primary military branch. The Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, functions as an infinite, galaxy-spanning army of temporary, entirely disposable military contractors. They are issued the standard lasgun, the cosmic equivalent of a cheap, mass-produced office stapler, and sent to die by the millions to secure a trivial logistical objective. The planetary commanders and field marshals view these staggering casualty reports through the exact same sociopathic lens an accountant views stationary expenses, a necessary, completely unremarkable cost of doing business in a hostile market. 1 million dead soldiers is not viewed as a catastrophic tragedy. It is simply noted as a minor logistical deficit, one that requires an immediate recruitment drive on the nearest civilized world, just to balance the spreadsheet. Furthermore, the technological stagnation of the Empire represents the ultimate consequence of lost institutional knowledge. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains the company's vital hardware not through applied engineering, not through scientific methodology, but through blind, dogmatic religious ritual. They chant sacred hymns to reboot targeting arrays. They burn holy incense to appease engine spirits. They apply sacred oils to server racks, simply because the original operating manuals were misplaced centuries ago. It is a civilization desperately performing essential IT troubleshooting through sheer superstition, entirely terrified that if they stop chanting, the cosmic network will permanently disconnect and plunge them into the Dark Age. They revere the machine. They fundamentally do not understand how the machine actually works. Overseeing these planetary branches are the Imperial governors, essentially corrupt middle managers who treat their assigned worlds like personal slush funds. They embezzle planetary resources. They construct lavish estates. They ruthlessly exploit their assigned workforce, all while completely ignoring the rotting infrastructural foundation beneath their feet. As long as the Imperial tithe, the mandatory corporate tax paid in resources, military recruits, and mutant psychers, is delivered on time, The central bureaucracy on Terra completely ignores whatever tyrannical abuses these governors inflict upon the working class. The Imperium does not care if a planet is ruled by a benevolent democratic council or a bloodthirsty dictator. Provided the quarterly shipments of artillery shells arrive precisely on schedule. The overarching tragedy here is the absolute embodiment of the sunk cost fallacy. The human species has invested 10 millennia of immeasurable suffering, trillions of lost lives, and endless oceans of blood into maintaining this broken corporate model. To admit the system is fundamentally flawed, to attempt a massive restructuring, would mean acknowledging that all those countless sacrifices were entirely meaningless. So the zombie megacorp shambles onward, crushing its own citizens beneath its rotting weight, driven entirely by a deeply ingrained, completely mindless commitment to maintaining the status quo. They cannot change course, because the momentum of their own misery is the only force keeping them moving forward. To enforce this agonizing status quo, the Imperium relies heavily upon the Inquisition, the galaxy's most paranoid, completely unchecked internal affairs department. In a healthy organization, an internal audit ensures efficiency, transparency, and the elimination of wasteful practices. In the Imperium, however, the Inquisition exists to ruthlessly purge any perceived deviation from the strict corporate mandate. They are investigators who operate with absolute impunity, possessing the supreme authority to override planetary governors, military generals, and standard legal frameworks. Without a single warrant, they justify their exorbitant operational budgets by constantly finding new enemies within the corporate structure, ensuring the workforce remains in a perpetual paralyzed state of terror. The methodologies employed by these ultimate regulators are profoundly sociopathic, devastatingly blunt. When an inquisitor determines that a planetary branch office has been compromised by heretical thought, demonic influence, or unauthorized alien contact, they rarely initiate a targeted restructuring program. Instead, they confidently authorize an exterminatus. This is the ultimate form of corporate liquidation. Completely vaporizing the planet from orbit, they will enthusiastically incinerate 12 billion innocent, tax-paying employees, simply because one mid-level clerk accidentally brought a forbidden, chaotic pamphlet into the break room. It is asset management executed through total planetary annihilation, proving that the department values absolute quarantine far above human life. The sheer absurdity of this department is compounded by its own internal factionalism. Because inquisitors possess limitless authority and zero external oversight, they frequently turn their vast state-funded resources against one another. Puritan auditors and radical operatives routinely engage in devastating, covert shadow wars, wasting immeasurable quantities of military assets, specialized personnel, and invaluable intelligence. They function exactly like rival corporate executives, deliberately sabotaging each other's projects to climb the organizational ladder, completely indifferent to the catastrophic collateral damage they inflict upon the company's bottom line. They are tasked with protecting the Empire, yet they treat the Empire as a personal chessboard for their own ideological disputes. While the Inquisition manages compliance through sheer terror, the Adeptus Ministorum, the Ecclesiarchy, functions as the mandatory human resources culture division. The Emperor originally envisioned a strictly secular, rational truth. He explicitly forbade religious worship of any kind. However, after his internment upon the Golden Throne, the surviving management required a powerful mechanism to ensure absolute, unquestioning loyalty from a terrified, battered populace. So they formally weaponized faith, transforming the comatose Emperor into a divine entity, establishing a mandatory, galaxy-spanning corporate religion designed to systematically eradicate independent thought and enforce ideological homogeneity. This theological HR department brilliantly monetizes the suffering of the imperial workforce. They construct continent-sized cathedrals using the grueling labor of starving citizens, effectively forcing the employees to build their own psychological prisons. The priests demand exorbitant tithes in the name of the God Emperor, selling the empty promise of spiritual salvation to the exact same people they ruthlessly oppress in the physical realm. They preach that suffering in this life is the ultimate currency to purchase a peaceful afterlife, brilliantly convincing the workforce to actively embrace their own exploitation. The ultimate tragedy? The Emperor himself, a staunch atheist, is now eternally trapped inside the very HR manual he desperately tried to delete. Together, the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy form an impenetrable, suffocating matrix of control. They represent a business entity that utilizes constant surveillance, mandatory corporate culture, and the perpetual threat of violent termination to keep its employees completely subservient. They ensure that the average human is vastly more terrified of receiving a bad performance review from a passing inquisitor than they are of an invading alien armada. The zombie megacorp does not simply consume the physical bodies of its workers. It meticulously devours their minds, entirely replacing their humanity with blind, fanatical devotion to a broken machine. To properly evaluate the crumbling market share of the Imperium of Man, one must analyze the external threats assailing its borders, not as terrifying cosmic monsters, as rival business entities executing ruthless hostile takeovers. The galaxy is effectively a saturated, fiercely competitive interdimensional marketplace. And the Imperium is the bloated, technologically stagnant monopoly rapidly losing ground to more dynamic, predatory startups. The zombie megacorp refuses to invest in research and development, refuses to adapt its archaic business model, and consequently spends every waking moment desperately attempting to fend off aggressive acquisition attempts. From every conceivable direction, the most insidious competitor is undoubtedly the forces of chaos. The ruinous powers operate exactly like a predatory, multi-level marketing firm, specializing in catastrophic corporate sabotage. They do not wish to destroy the physical infrastructure of the Imperium. They want to acquire the primary assets, the souls and minds of the workforce. Chaos cults function as grassroots pyramid schemes, infiltrating the lowest levels of the hive cities by promising rapid career advancement, unlimited power, and immediate relief from the suffocating corporate grind. They prey on the absolute misery generated by the Imperium's own HR department, proving that when a company treats its employees like disposable garbage, those employees will eagerly sign a contract with a literal demon just to secure a better dental plan. Contrasting the psychological warfare of chaos, the Tyranid Hive Fleet represents the ultimate, unfeeling asset-stripping firm. They are a terrifyingly efficient corporate entity that entirely lacks office politics, internal bureaucracy, or ideological baggage. The Tyranids do not care about the Imperium's rich history, its religious culture, its market dominance. They view the entire galaxy strictly as raw, unrefined biomass, waiting to be liquidated. When a hive fleet descends upon an imperial planet, it is the cosmic equivalent of a massive corporate liquidation event. They consume the employees, the infrastructure, and the very atmosphere, meticulously balancing their biological spreadsheet before moving on to the next profitable acquisition target, leaving behind a barren rock stripped of all marketable value. Meanwhile, the Orc Menace functions as an unending, decentralized wave of violent labor strikes and chaotic startup energy. They possess no overarching business plan, no central management structure, no long-term financial goals. They are the ultimate cosmic hooligans, thriving entirely on the thrill of market disruption. Orcs will casually crash an imperial supply chain simply because they enjoy the loud noises produced when the corporate freighters explode. They are a perpetual, screaming migraine for the Adeptus Administratum, constantly forcing the Imperium to waste premium military resources, suppressing unorganized mobs that literally sprout from the ground, like aggressive fungal weeds. Watching from the fringes are the legacy corporations, the Eldari and the Necrons. These ancient factions represent old, bankrupt money. They previously owned the galactic monopoly millions of years before humanity ever drafted its first corporate charter. Now, they look upon the Imperium of Man with the profound aristocratic disgust of a former billionaire watching a rabid pack of stray dogs tear apart their meticulously manicured estate. They occasionally intervene in the current market, executing surgical strikes to protect their hidden long-term investments, but they generally view the Imperium as a grotesque, poorly managed upstart, currently ruining the property value of the entire cosmos. Faced with this terrifying array of superior competitors, the Imperium's strategic response is breathtakingly stubborn. Instead of adapting, innovating, or attempting to negotiate standard mergers, the High Lords of Terror simply continue to throw an endless, blinding storm of underpaid human bodies into the meat grinder. They attempt to drown the competition in a tsunami of bureaucratic blood, clinging to the pathetic delusion that if they just sacrifice enough basic contractors, the rival conglomerates will eventually run out of ammunition and go home. To distract the general workforce from this catastrophic market reality, the MEGACORP heavily relies upon its premium public relations department and supreme security contractors. The Adeptus Astarte, commonly known as the Space Marines. While the standard Imperial Guard starves in muddy trenches holding cheap flashlights, the Space Marines receive the absolute pinnacle of corporate funding. They are genetically engineered, psycho-indoctrinated, clad in phenomenally expensive ceramite power armor. They function as the ultimate corporate brand ambassadors. Their striking colors and heroic silhouettes plastered across trillions of recruitment posters, projecting a completely fabricated illusion of invincibility. The creation of a Space Marine is a masterclass in extreme, irreversible corporate conditioning. A standard human child is violently stripped of his original identity, his biological family, and his fundamental capacity for normal empathy. Through grueling surgical augmentations and psychological scrubbing, the individual is transformed into a perfectly compliant, unfeeling weapon, entirely devoted to the company mission statement. They do not demand salaries. They never take vacations. They possess absolutely no concept of a life outside the corporate hierarchy. They are the ultimate, terrifying dream of every sociopathic CEO. An employee who literally lives, breathes, and dies strictly for the company logo printed on his shoulder pad. However, from a sheer logistical standpoint, the deployment of the Adeptus Astartes is mathematically absurd. There are roughly 1 million Space Marines tasked with defending an empire composed of over 1 million worlds. They are a statistical anomaly, a boutique security firm assigned to guard a burning continent-sized warehouse. Consequently, they do not fight standard wars. They execute incredibly brief, spectacular marketing presentations. A Space Marine strike cruiser will drop into a war zone, ruthlessly obliterate the enemy command structure in a brilliant flash of cinematic violence, and then immediately extract themselves. To attend the next crisis, they secure the glorious victory for the cameras, purposefully leaving the under-equipped Imperial Guard behind, to spend the next 2 decades manually cleaning up the radioactive mess. This dynamic creates a profound, disturbing disconnect between the elite contractors and the baseline human employees they supposedly protect. The imperial citizens are mandated by the ecclesiarchy to worship the Astartes as literal angels of death, divine instruments of the Emperor's will. Yet the Space Marines generally view standard humans with cold, detached indifference. To an immortal, genetically perfected demigod, a weeping civilian is not a tragic victim. They are merely an acceptable, completely unremarkable statistic of collateral damage. The company mascot despises the very consumers who worship the brand. The internal corporate friction within this department was recently exacerbated by the rollout of the Primaris initiative under Reboot Guilliman. The Primaris Marines were introduced as the new, upgraded software patch. Taller, stronger, completely devoid of the legacy genetic flaws that plagued the older models, the veteran firstborn Marines viewed these incoming assets with profound suspicion and resentment. Reacting exactly like senior legacy employees, suddenly forced to train a batch of genetically superior corporate interns explicitly designed to eventually replace them. It is an ongoing, quiet HR nightmare, playing out behind heavily armored doors. Ultimately, the Adeptus Astartes perfectly encapsulate the core tragedy of the zombie megacorp. They are beautifully designed, incredibly lethal, entirely awe-inspiring. But a shiny security badge, a premium uniform, and a fantastic marketing campaign cannot fix a fundamentally broken supply chain. The Space Marines can win 1,000 spectacular battles, but they are completely powerless to stop the slow, agonizing bureaucratic rot consuming the foundation of the Empire. They are the finest warriors ever forged, tragically tasked with defending a corporate entity that is already dead. A final, philosophical audit of the Imperium of Man forces us to confront a deeply unsettling reality about the fundamental nature of the apocalypse. In popular mythology, the end of the world is traditionally depicted as a sudden, spectacular cataclysm, a blinding flash of nuclear fire, a dramatic demonic invasion that instantly shatters the sky. However, the 41st millennium proves that true cosmic oblivion is vastly more mundane. The actual apocalypse is a painfully slow, agonizingly dull process of systemic rot, stretching across tens of thousands of years. It is a slow-motion train wreck. The passengers are completely aware the bridge is out, but they are strictly forbidden from leaving their assigned seats until they finish filling out their mandatory compliance surveys. The foundational tragedy of this staggering civilization is the total, irreversible death of its original mission statement. The Emperor of Mankind launched his initial crusade to liberate the species from ignorance, superstition, and tyrannical exploitation. He envisioned a pristine, rational utopia, guided by science. 10 millennia later, that secular dream has been thoroughly digested and excreted by the very administrative apparatus he constructed. The current iteration of the company is the exact, literal manifestation of the nightmare he originally sought to destroy. The Imperium operates as a sprawling, blood-soaked slaughterhouse, where logic is legally classified as treason, where the original founder is permanently held hostage by his own deranged board of directors, utilized merely as a shiny hood ornament, for a vehicle completely devoid of a steering wheel, for the countless trillions of ordinary employees trapped within the lower decks of this crumbling leviathan. The very concept of victory has been completely eradicated from the corporate vocabulary. They are no longer fighting to build a better future, to secure prosperity for their descendants, or even to achieve lasting peace. They are bleeding and dying in the mud purely to satisfy an abstract, unfeeling spreadsheet, maintained by aristocrats who have never seen the sun. They are sacrificing their bodies, their sanity, and their children strictly to ensure that the monumental administrative machine survives just one more fiscal quarter. It is the ultimate manifestation of existential futility, an entire species enthusiastically throwing itself into a furnace, simply to keep the furnace warm. This profound internal decay renders the myriad external threats almost entirely redundant. The ruinous powers of chaos, the endless tyrannid swarms, the brutal orc migrations, they certainly inflict catastrophic damage. But they are not the true architects of humanity's downfall. The Imperium is actively, systematically murdering itself, through sheer, unadulterated administrative friction. The alien and the demon are merely cosmic scavengers, patiently picking at the rotting flesh of a gargantuan corpse, one that is simply too stubborn to lie down. If every single external enemy suddenly vanished tomorrow, the Imperium would still inevitably collapse, under the crushing, suffocating weight of its own corrupt bureaucracy and ideological stagnation. We are forced to accept a bitter, stomach-churning enlightenment regarding the ultimate fate of this civilization. The universe vividly demonstrates that the apocalypse does not always arrive in a sudden, dramatic explosion of hellfire. The truest, most terrifying apocalypse occurs when your entire civilization slowly, agonizingly rots away. Over tens of thousands of years, completely loses its moral compass, descends into an abyss of unrelenting cruelty, and yet, you are simply too busy filling out mandatory tax forms, attending mandatory corporate seminars to even notice you are already in hell. You are physically alive, but your fundamental humanity was quietly terminated by the accounting department. Centuries ago. The final diagnostic evaluation concludes that the Imperium of Man is not a glorious bastion of human defiance. It is the towering supreme monument to the sunk cost fallacy. It stands as a grim clinical warning to the cosmos, that the absolute greatest enemy of sentient life is never the alien predator lurking in the dark, nor the whispering demon attempting to corrupt the soul. The most devastating, inescapable threat to any civilization is a bloated, inflexible corporate bureaucracy. One that demands unwavering loyalty, consumes everything it touches, and fundamentally forgets how to stop printing paperwork. Thank you for contacting the Adeptus Administratum, Department of Employee Extinction and Planetary Foreclosure. Please listen closely, as our menu options have recently changed. According to our central filing system, your specific planetary branch was officially consumed by a tyrannid hive fleet approximately 400 standard years ago. Consequently, your continued biological existence is currently classified as an unauthorized violation of Imperial Ledger protocols. Operating a physical body without proper administrative clearance is a Class A corporate offense. To correct this bureaucratic discrepancy and successfully balance the quarterly spreadsheet, please proceed immediately to your nearest municipal incinerator and self-terminate. Do not attempt to file a grievance. The complaint department was permanently lost in the warp. During the 32nd millennium, thank you for your unyielding service to the God Emperor. Your dedication to statistical compliance is deeply appreciated. Have a perfectly productive non-existence.